Hello there. There's not a particular reason for tuning in now. The only thing I wanted to share is that I just wondered if you guys sometimes feel like an emotional roller coaster. And what I mean by that is that normally I catch myself sometimes when um, we have these external circumstances happening in our lives that we quickly make it part of our lives. So we're always reacting to whatever happens on in our external world. So let's say when we have, I always say, I compare it, I do it in my journey as well, and I mention it often as it's easy to be nice to people when the weather is good, right? When the sun is shining. But are you still the same kind of person and the nice person as soon as it starts to rain? Are you still, when it gets nasty, when the circumstances get nasty, are you still able to maintain your balance and still be the same person as you are on the sunny days, right? And that's when it gets interesting, because normally sometimes we look at people and we just wonder, they come from, maybe we look at them. There's this story about a housemaid and a woman, and this housemaid who was working for this woman, and she always thought like, wow, this woman has such a great life, and she acts in a way that's very inspiring. She's always being very nice to people and treating them well, and being very, always giving compliments and those kind of things. And then she just wondered like, okay, so what is it that this person has that I'm lacking? And then she looked at her life, and it looked like she had it all figured out, right? So she had a nice house, she had a lot of money, she was a wealthy person. Eventually she had a housemaid, and then the housemaid decided at one point to not show up anymore, to show up later during that day. And that's when it got interesting, because, and then what happened next is that when she came later, the woman was furious. She was furious. And then she got nasty, right? So she really thought like, okay, why are you late? You should be coming on time. And she started scolding the person. And that's when she figured out like, okay, maybe this just happened once because it was a change in her external circumstance. And then she did it again, and the same thing happened. And that's when she noticed that this person was always subject to her external environments, that eventually it was easy for her to be nice because things went well. And when things go well, it's very easy for everyone to be nice, right? And that's the thing. And that's why in this story, I think it's really the beauty of it, that I catch myself on it like literally all the time, that when we get into these situations, like I just described the women, right? She had the good weather. She had sunny days. It was all good stuff. And when it's sunny, everyone can be nice to you and whatever. And when we have a lot, it's we think it's easier to share, right? And then the funny thing is, still in these kind of circumstances, even we don't have a lot, are you still maintaining the same habits? Are you still being the same person, even when it gets nasty, when the weather gets nasty? And that's why I always say like, okay, look at yourself. Or in this case, I was really looking at me like, okay, so what is it within me that is really, really triggering this, right? So why am I still the same person if my circumstances change? Am I still being nice to people if the circumstances change? So can I be nice, let's say, on the sunny day, and can I still be nice to people on a rainy day? And when we start to notice those patterns in our lives, that as soon as it gets nasty, we start to change, it means we become an emotional roller coaster of our lives. We in the Netherlands, we always say a kip zonder kop. A chicken without a head that's really just running around all the time. Because what happens then, I you can compare it maybe with a donkey, and you have this donkey standing. There's this image of a donkey, and then he has this big piece of he has a branch in the front, and then there's a rope and there's a carrot in the front of him. and you can really see he's running after the carrot and he's going. And the funny thing is, he was so focused on the carrot that eventually he was really craving for the carrot because he really liked the carrot. And the funny thing is, maybe he would have passed grasses of green, passing fields of carrots all over the place. But because he was so focused, he wasn't able to see that. And that's something I noticed, for instance, also in my life, that I consider myself still subject to external environments. So if things change in my life, I notice that I can feel more negativity within myself. I can feel more depressed, more miserable, and those kind of things. And I think it's so interesting to see, like, hey, so how can it be that actually things that come from outside shake us so much that we change our attitudes towards life or whatsoever? Well, I think we are able to reach this state of happiness constantly that isn't necessarily affecting the person or the way we reach outside, right? The person we are. And so I think eventually, if not being this emotional roller coaster or saying like, oh, and I want this and I want to get there and I feel like having this, and if I don't get it, I feel bad and whatsoever. And then suddenly there comes this other thing and we're like, oh, I feel so terrible right now and stressed. So I really need to go on holiday. And if I don't get it, I will stay depressed and whatsoever. And then I'm like, whoa. And as soon as that happens, we're really craving for something. We're clinging, attaching towards something. And then at other times when things don't go the way we want, it's really like, no, 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 I don't want this. And we back off. And that means we're constantly either running towards something or running away from something. Don't you think that's super tiring? I don't know how you guys experience this, but I find it super amazingly tiring that all the time I catch myself also doing this, sometimes like really, no, no, this I don't want to feel, and this affects me, and this doesn't. So I don't know how it is for you. Are you guys experiencing this, let's say, the emotional roller coaster of running towards something? Oh, you really want to have it, and it really, you can feel that it does something with you, and you need to have it. It's a need. And other times you really feel like, no, I need to stay away from this, or no, I don't want to deal with this or this negativity or whatsoever. I'm very curious. So if you're experiencing this, the emotional roller coaster, please let me know. Because I feel like a yo-yo sometimes, these things that you throw down and they come up, and you throw down and then they come up. And basically that's interesting because I think what happens there is life, right? I mean, eventually things will always go like this. There's no constant. There never has been. One of the only laws that exists in the world is impermanence. That things don't exist forever. They change constantly, constantly, constantly. The only thing that doesn't change is change. And I think as soon as we start to realize that everything comes and goes, like even the nasty weather, but also the sunny weather, it means that as soon as we know that and we become aware of that, which is the most important part, I think, becoming aware of the coming and going of things, the impermanence of things, and the only thing that doesn't change is change, then as soon as we know that, if something bad happens, we would just say like, okay, I know this will pass after a while. So why create this whole aversion towards it and make this a big thing in your life? Why, there comes the time then it goes away. And the same with the good weather. Why really, as soon as you know that it starts to get, the weather changes, or really saying to yourself like, yeah, I I need sun in my life, and I just need sun in my life because else I can't function. Then I think like you're so dependent. You're so dependent on the weather. And then with the weather, I mean, obviously external circumstances. Well, I think how amazing would it be if we could all just maintain this constant state of happiness by not being that much affected by external circumstance anymore. That doesn't mean you can't be happy anymore, but then you know that at least it comes from joy and not a sense of craving or really clinging onto something. And I think that changes the whole game. If we learn how to do that and not really create this craving and clinging towards something, then things change. So what I notice now, I just came back, for people who know, from a Vipassana retreat between brackets, 10 days of meditation, uh, no talking for 10 days, no writing, no listening, uh, no reading, no contact with other persons. And it gets interesting at this point. Please stay here, because as soon as you do that, it's a very interesting pattern we have, right? Because as I mentioned before, that always when we feel stressed, we want to do something, right? So we always think like, I need to go to the sauna, I need to go to the cinema, I need to put on some music and whatsoever. But what we're actually doing, I mean, it works, right? I'm not saying it doesn't work, but there's a different kind of working within this. Because if you do that, you're working on the short term. Because when we do this, let's say we go to the sauna and we come back and we say like, I feel so relaxed right now. You're not solving the problem. I mean, you're solving the problem on the short term, right? You do it at that moment that makes a change, that changes your state, which makes sense because you're changing your state, which you end up looking at it differently. But it doesn't purify the mind, right? It doesn't purify. So you stay at the surface level. You're not dealing with the root cause. You're still here and changing the surface. So let's say that at these moments you're like, let's go back to the weather. So let's say you're at a certain place, the weather gets nasty. What do? We fly to another place. We go to the sunny weather. Well, I would say if you know how to live under both circumstances, then you'll always be happy. Like when they say, everywhere you go, you always take the weather with you. And it's so right. It's so spot on. So I believe that as soon as we start to realize this, that we shouldn't always be looking to ease the pain at that certain point, which it is okay if you do it sometimes, I think, but we need to be aware that by doing that, we're not solving the problem. We're solving the short-term problem, but we're not dealing with the root cause. That's a massive difference. So I believe as soon as we know how to get to the root cause, or at least observe where it comes from. So let's say, for instance, the weather. Let's go back to the weather. So if you have nasty weather, right, and you feel like, and I'm not feeling this and I want to do something else, then just wonder like, what is it within you that is creating this frustration? And if you know how to look at your frustration from a distance, observing, not being overwhelmed by the emotion, which is not being the emotion, then you get a different perspective. Then you can look at it and you can really see like, okay, there's frustration coming up because I can feel it two ways, either by my thoughts and also the physiology that reacts to it. And eventually, normally this results also in actions and stuff. So back to the topic, what I noticed, for instance, is that as soon as we know how to recognize these causes, and I mean, that already makes a massive change in our lives, because I believe now everything that happens, so let's say this, action is the result, right? But the root cause in general is a thought, is an intention that's behind that is eventually resulting in an action. So what I noticed, for instance, during my Vipassana, is that so you're literally the whole day just with your thoughts, with your mind. So that's why people don't do it, because they said like, I will go insane. Yes, you know why? Because we are insane. And that's the funny part of it, but we're running away from it. We're always looking for distraction. Our phone, we go to different places. We need to go on vacation. I need to spend time with friends. If I'm alone, I can't deal with silence. I need to have music on. There's so much stuff going on. Well, I think like, stay there, stay there. Just don't listen to music once. Don't go on vacation once. Learn how to deal with yourself and not run away from it all the time, because that's basically what we're doing at these points. So back to the topic, I was with my thoughts just literally more than 24/7. I was meditating for 10 hours a day, just being with your thoughts. And the funny thing is, one of the topics that came up like big time massively, which I was really surprised about, were women. And then I mean passion. I could see myself do all kind of sexy stuff, sexy time stuff and whatever. And I just couldn't believe it. I was so surprised. Honestly, I was so surprised because the people who know me, I'm not the type of person who has sexy time every week and does those kind of things, because normally I've had periods that I didn't have sexy time easily for 4 months, no problem. And so if it happens, it was okay. If it didn't happen, it was also okay. But then that's when I started thinking like, oh wow, where does this come from? I don't get it, because I'm not dealing with so many women all the time. It doesn't keep me busy in my physical life, right? I'm not running from one woman to another. I'm not having a sexy time every week or whatsoever. So if it happens, it's okay. It's good. But if it doesn't happen, it's also okay. And then I thought like, wow, we're so fucked. So what are the things that are, and then I realized that there's two different things, because as I mentioned before, actions are the result. Actions is eventually a result from what happens before, from intention or thoughts that arise. And then I think like, maybe we have a point there. Maybe we have a point there, because maybe it doesn't result in actions, in me doing all this stuff and craving and running from one woman to another and those kind of stuff. But maybe in my thoughts, there's still this impure thoughts. I call them impure because they have an effect on you that makes you think about this stuff, maybe not resulting in action, but it is still part of your reality that goes on inside. So maybe even when you're seeing a woman, or I think it's very simple. Now that we're on Instagram, look at the people who you follow. So look at maybe the same sex or the opposite sex, the one you're attracted to, and look out the kind of persons you're following. Right? I think it I think it becomes so clear if I think about it now. Are you following the big booties, or are you following the inspirational women? That's a very big difference, right? So I think these are very clear examples for how what keeps you busy, maybe not in physical actions, but what keeps you busy in this crazy casino. And that's when you start to realize that oh my God, I think we're really fucked up in our way of thinking, that there's so much stuff going on that constantly just not being really aware of what the root cause is of something. Because now, for instance, when I look at crazy casino, right, that's the thing. Because now when we look, for instance, when I look at a woman or something, I can definitely get distracted by a woman for sure. And also when I look at them, then I think like, okay, what are the thoughts that are in my mind? Am I looking at the person like, hey, this is a beautiful person I'm having a conversation with? Or is my first observation, she looks beautiful, she has a beautiful body? Those are two very different things, because I believe we can get to a stage that we really, like when they say, don't judge a book by its cover, and the cover would be the physical appearance, but more from the inside. And I believe that's when it becomes interesting, because now we're doing completely the opposite thing. So back to the story, I noticed that it's more on the intention and thought level and not on the action level, because action level is normally when the thoughts or the intentions, they become so big that eventually they result in action. So I believe that when you know, at least become aware of your intentions. So let's say, for instance, why are you saying this to a person? I raised the topic actually yesterday with a friend, and we were just talking about this topic, and then I said to him, yeah, I just wonder why I say certain things sometimes. Let's say that I traveled for 13 months, or that I met the Dalai Lama, that I went above 6,100 meters, or that I, whatever it is, that I'm running an own company. And then I think like, okay, I know we're telling it, but the thing is, what I really want you to consider is, what is the thought, what is the intention of you telling it? Because that makes a big difference. Because often we tell things, we say things, we do things because we think out of, what can I get? Because you know that if you raise the topic of the Dalai Lama, meeting the Dalai Lama, then people will say like, whoa, that's so cool, that's amazing. What happens next? You told it, maybe without even knowing if the person would like it, but you did it for yourself because you wanted to feed the ego jar, right? You wanted to buffer yourself up, like, yeah, I know, that's cool, right? Look at this, yeah. And um, I became the first one to the first intern to fly to the UK and present this project to the marketing leadership team. And then I think like, okay, so what's the aim of you telling that? Because now we're so not being aware, in the sense of nearly sleeping, because thoughts come in from the back and we just pop out stuff, and we're constantly feeding the ego and all the impure thoughts. Well, I think if we get to the point, let's say back to the topic of the Dalai Lama. So imagine me saying to a person, yeah, and I've been there and I've met the Dalai Lama and it was amazing. It would make sense if you think like, okay, how can this contribute to the conversation that you can have with that person? Because maybe, the person is interested in Buddhism whatsoever. Then I say like, okay, there's a legit reason for you to raise the topic. But if it comes out of you saying it because you want to feed the ego, or saying like, yeah, I did this and whatsoever, then I think like, this is not the way we should be going, because we're now, I believe those are the impure thoughts. So we're doing it out of a wrong intention. Let's say now, for instance, let me go another example. A never-ending journey, for the people who know it, a company. I don't like the word, but it was an idea I started, and then I took people to Nepal on a journey, an adventurous journey inward. So really working on yourself, and at the same time outside. So combined with tracks, volunteering, everything combined. It was amazing. And what the interesting thing was is that it was the first time, and I think I couldn't have a better start, like for real. And then I did it for a second time, or I tried to do it for the second time just now in October. And when I started promoting just before summertime, around summertime, I noticed halfway like, I shouldn't be doing this. I wasn't feeling it. And the reason why is because actually now I understand what happened. Because because I really wanted to go another time, and I started to charge more money. And then I thought like, why isn't it working out? Somehow it wasn't working out. I don't know what was going on. And I noticed that now when I started approaching people, it wasn't anymore. There was a difference. So I believe there was a reason why it wasn't really working the way I wanted. Because now when I started approaching people, it was like, hey, I think you should come. And I started sending people messages like, hey, are you still interested? Do you like this? And those kind of things. And then I think that something changed here. And now I know. What do you guys think it is? I'm very curious to know if you can understand what really made the difference this time. Why I wasn't feeling it. Because for me now, it will definitely be something that I will continuously ask myself. Always really just asking myself, like, I hope someone comes with a question or an answer to see. And this is actually not the only example. So back to the topic, just maybe if you know, so what I said before, why do you think sometimes things turn out the way you want them to turn out? You want them to turn out, and sometimes when they don't turn out the way you want them to turn out. Another example, workshops. So I'm hosting workshops, and this one had to do with Dream Big with Big Dreamers, really focus on dream creating, goal setting, those kind of things. And the first time, a very nice show up. 10 people came, super nice. Second time, I think 6 people came, and the last time was different as well. Hi there, Wicked Grounds and L. And the funny thing is, I noticed myself that as the numbers, because it's from your soul, Jacqueline says, yes, exactly. Because it's from your soul. So back to the topic, why did Nepal didn't turn out this time in October? And why did it happen just instantly back in October last year? And it was indeed from the soul, because there was such a huge difference. Because the ego would say, what can I get? Well, the soul would say, how can I serve? Right? And that is such a big difference. So I noticed that what was the difference now this year compared to last year? And it was exactly that question. Because back then I really thought like, wow, I think I created this beautiful concept that could really help people dive into themselves and at the same time get the experience of a journey of really traveling and discovering and exploring and that with other people and creating this big synergy and harmony together, that I felt like, you should come, you should come. And that's such a big difference than saying like, hey, I think you should come because I need to fill my group. Yeah, it's not how I can grow, but how we can grow. Yeah, like they say in Dutch, um, alone, alone, you will get there faster, but together you'll get further. And this was the same thing, that at the first time I really thought like, I think you should come because this is going to be amazing and really contributing to your life. I know that to some extent it will really help you better understand yourself, the person that you are, the things that are limiting you from being who you want to be, the things that are in your external environment that are now also refraining you from doing stuff, and how you can give back more. And that's when I thought like, okay, now I know, because that was my magic. That's my magic. Because I thought out of really serving other people, okay, so what can I give them that can contribute or make an impact in their lives? What can I give them? And this time it was slightly different, because I had the feeling that now we're going more official with the company and those kind of stuff, that I thought like, okay, I need to get more serious. And that's when you have to make the deals and those kind of stuff. But it never felt real to me. It never felt like the authentic me. And that's what I started noticing along the way. That every time when I did this, it didn't turn out. Why? Back to the topic from the first time, because I was craving this. I was really being affected that if this would change, or it would not result in the result I wanted to have, like I wanted to have, and not how it should be going, that was where the craving came from. And then we start to do spastic stuff, right? And that's what we constantly do in our lives when we're afraid to lose something, or a person getting out of our lives. And then I think like, hey, but there's two risks every single time we do stuff. So let's say when you want to say something to a person, there's two risks. There's either the risk of that person maybe feeling offended or walking away from you, or I believe the way bigger risk, hurting yourself. Why? Because basically by not saying it, you're putting the other person making them become a higher priority, here we are, than you are, right? Because you're placing the other person on a higher level than you are. Well, I believe if you stick to yourself and you stick to your own truth, and you know that either way, you can still be strict and you can still say things like, hey, I'm sorry, but I believe you fucked up this time. That's not being nice. That's actually being very nice. But the difference is the volition, the intention that is behind that. Are you saying this out of love? Really saying like, hey, I want to mention this to this person so he can become a better person or maybe do differently next time? Or are you saying this out of anger? Saying like, hey, you fucked up. You really have to do it different now time because you hurt me. And even though hurt people, I think the hurt people can still try not to hurt the other person by at that moment really saying like, okay, I've been hurt by the things you did, but I love you. But I love you the way you are. And by saying that or feeling this love, you can still say like, hey, I love you. And that's why I want you to know that you really fucked up this time. Right? And that's such a different approach. That if, at least if you know that you do it out of the heart and really knowing like, okay, there's love in here, and that's the reason why I'm telling you, because I want you to know so you can become a better person. That's when we start to let go of the ego, of the self, of the person, of the things, of the what can I get? Because at that person, as soon as we're being more we progress on this path, right, of not being affected by external circumstance anymore, then these occurrences, they wouldn't hurt you anymore, because you would reach this constant state of happiness. So either if you get the low blows or the really highs, you would still be in the middle, right? And that's the path of love. So I believe as soon as we stay there and we get this continuous path, you fucked up and you motherfucker and this and that, and you'll say like, you know what? It's okay. Or at least look at that person like, oh, poor guy, I think he needs help, or he had some struggles in his life. For instance, I was so confronted with this last week. So I'm a super light sleeper. And during this meditation, I think you only have 6 hours of sleep and there's 10 hours of meditation. So basically when this happened in the night, this guy woke up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And I was going crazy, you know, because I woke up every single time he woke up. And then I first noticed myself getting frustrated. I really felt like, dude, what the fuck is this guy doing? Waking up all the time and this and that. And then I thought like, hey, that is me. That is my frustration. That's what I feel when this person wakes up. But it could be that another person could think about this situation completely different. And that's when I thought like, hey, why am I creating all this frustration towards this person? Well, I could also think like, hey, maybe this person can't sleep. Poor guy. And then I noticed myself even calming down. And even though he came in back and forth, I was able to fall asleep because I knew how to maintain my happiness, my constant state, by not being affected that much by your external environment. So yeah, the things I want you to take home out of this is that this external environment, it's a big casino, what I call it, life, really. So it's a mess, it's a rat race. There's so much sensation, things going on from the outside, but it's just as much things going on from the inside, because through every of these sensations, situations, we always react. Always, that's what we do. That's our conditioning. We react to everything we see, to colors, to shapes, to words, to sounds, to everything that happens. So then I think like, if we know, at least if we can't change the circumstances, let us at least gain control of our mind, because maybe we can have physical pain, but don't let it become a mental pain. That's because then you're just really multiplying the effect. So I believe as soon what I just want to give you and maybe to think about for next time, or just in your life, daily life. Every time you tell something to a person, what are you feeling? Are you telling it to, let's say, to continue to keep the conversation going? Or are you saying things because you want people to feel, to be impressed by the person that you are? Well, I believe I'm impressed by the person who are more humble, because I know they have more, they've done more, but they don't think that's the essence of the things they're doing. Massive difference. So just consider every time you do stuff out of guilt, out of shame, out of ego, out of jealousy, out of greed, out of love, really everything, just try to at least figure out for yourself, like, okay, what am I feeding here? Where does this come from? What is the intention? What is the volition behind the things we want to do, behind the things we say, the things we do, the way we act, the thoughts we have, because their thoughts come before the action. Don't never forget that. Then we start to really understand the person that we are at this point, the things we think about and the things we do, and those result always in actions. So as soon as we do that and we start to really recognize that the thinking pattern we have, so where do these negative thoughts come from? And when you start to at least observe, you're breaking the chain for maybe just a tiny bit or just a tiny moment. But I can promise you that this ray of light gets broken more frequently, more often, right? So maybe maybe in 10 times, it will first be one time. But maybe the next time, when instead of reacting immediately, you think like, okay, oof, I can notice that I'm feeling a little bit of anger, frustrated, whatsoever. Where does this come from? What is it that is coming up that is creating this reaction within me? And every time we do that, we observe, we take a step back, and that's the moment we break the light, just maybe for a tiny bit, for a tiny moment. And you can notice that as soon as you start catching, I nearly call it catching a thief, that it normally is just stealing everything and messing everything up in the house and turning everything around. Every time you look back and you look at the thief, he stops. And then when you look away, he goes again, boom, 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 and then you look again, and he stops. But the more you look, the more times he has to stop doing it, right? Till at one point he will get tired of stopping all the time. So he will just walk out the door, and you think like, you know what? I have nothing to gain here anymore, so I'm out. And that's when I truly believe we get to a point that the external circumstances will less affect your life. So that's something I want you to take you home. Just think about, be aware, just observe really the intention and the volition, the thoughts that come. Just break them for a little bit. When you catch yourself doing something like, hey, well, why did I just think that? Why did I just think like I'm not good enough? And as soon as you start breaking this pattern, just slowly, it takes a lot of time. I'm not even close. But you're creating more these moments of really backing off and looking at your life. Well, you can now just say, like when they use meditation, and you have to look at the clouds as your thoughts. And basically, that's interesting because it's a totally different view, and it's so explanatory because the thoughts are above you, right? You're not being identified with your thoughts at that very moment because you're looking at your thoughts. You're not experiencing your thoughts anymore. And that's what you're trying to do, that every time there's an action and thought, you're basically looking at it as a cloud. And that's when you start to break this habit pattern and really create slowly more, let's say, light that shines through the clouds, and slowly the clouds will just disappear, kind of. So that's it. Anna, thank you. The food work, it's actually food for thought. So yeah, for sure. So that's maybe something, yeah, you feel like considering or just think about. And that's it. So remember that behind every action, there's an intention, there's a thought, that is followed up eventually in words, in actions. But if you know what the root cause is, so the intention, the thought, then you can really start to recognize or identify the way you function. And if you know that, that's when they always say, you have a machine, how does it work? We don't know, like my motorbike, right? It looks beautiful from the outside, and it is. But if I only know how the thing works if if I disassemble the motorbike. So when people ask me, how do you know how to do this? By experiencing, right? By really disassembling everything that's within the motorbike, all the parts, the pieces. Look at this. Now I understand why it is here and where it functions, what it does in the whole engine in order to function. Okay, cool. Now I know. Let's put it back. And as soon as you know that and something happens or you use the brake and something goes wrong in the sense of reacting, now you know where it comes from, right? Now you know, like, okay, because I know if I press this one, the fluid goes in there. So the problem may be there. The root cause is there because you disassembled, you identified, you mapped it out. You now understand what the root cause is of the intention, which eventually result in a problem. So let's say the troubledness, right? All the impurities we have, jealousy, greed, anger, frustration, but also all the cravings, the real desires we have, the lust, those kind of things. And as soon as we know how to do that, we can really break the habit pattern of our minds, which means we become master of our own mind because we're not that much affected by our external circumstance anymore, because we become the master of our minds. Because external circumstances, things will happen. That's just life. Again, the only thing that doesn't change is change. So, and that will always happen in your life, in your external world. But the same thing will also happen in your internal world. So why give it so much meaning? Why always just run around like, and I need this and I want this and I don't want to let go because this person, he means so much to me. And then eventually when that person leaves, you're done, right? You're unhappy. You don't know how to continue with your life. And then I think, like, if you know how to become whole or really understand yourself and maintain this constant level of happiness, external factors won't have an influence anymore that big. But obviously this comes with a lot of steps and a lot of progress. And the first one is really becoming aware by saying this, by doing this. Where does it come from? What am I feeding at this point? Am I feeding the ego? Am I feeding greed? If you know, then you really start to make a change. You don't have to do more at that point because you already became aware. You're catching the thief in action. And the more you catch the thief in action, the less he wants to be in action because there's no more room for him to be in action because of catching all the time. And you look and he stops and you look and he stops and you think like, okay, you know what? I'm done. And he goes out. And then you can start. Then there's a room left, a clean room, because there's nothing left. So that's one of the things I just wanted for you to take away. Just maybe just consider becoming more aware of your thoughts by not being, because now we're just emotional roller coaster, constantly reacting to our external environments, which has an effect on our physiology, on the way we think, those kind of things. And as soon as you do that, you really start to recognize what happens in your life. And then basically emotional roller coaster, what is the intention, the external environments, and just by becoming aware of it. And as soon as you do that, you're not identifying yourself that much anymore, which means you're slowly making the ride less bumpy and more flowy. That's it. This just had to came out. It's crazy because I just thought like, okay, what I'm going to talk about, I don't know, but I felt like sharing something after 10 days of not talking. And yeah, this is it. So I hope it works for you. If it was something that served you, please let me know. If there are certain thoughts now that are raised that you thought about, like, oh, wow, I actually caught myself doing this, please let me know, because I would love to share more stories, you know? And what I really want to focus on now is that I truly believe that vulnerability connects people. They connect us. I've talked about this topics many times before, but as soon as we start sharing stuff, we start to realize, also for other persons, that we're not alone, that we're all going through the same emotions, the same stuff, even though we're in different circumstances. And that's the beauty of it. So we have a lot in common. Even if you're the richest man or the poorest guy, we're still dealing with the same type of discomfort, the feeling of discomfort, of anger, frustration, those kind of things. They will always be there. No matter you drive a Ferrari, if you have a flat tire, you're still frustrated. So, and that's why I believe that if we, as long as we start really sharing all these beautiful messages and really what's in the heart and in the mind, and like daring to say like, hey, I don't know sometimes, and then we can really make a difference together, and really start sharing stuff. So if you have anything to share, even if it's with me or just in a post, in a group share, whatsoever, please let me know. Please tag me. I would love to read whatever food for thought I gave you that has now arisen in something to think about or to change in your life. It would be amazing. So thank you everyone who tuned in. Kate, beautiful message. I know this resonates with you because that's what it does with beautiful persons. Leo, good to have you. Good that you that you stuck all the way. Anna, same. Anna Lucia. Oh, there's so many people. Jacqueline. So thank you guys. Take care. Have a good one, and see you later. Bye. Okay, that's out of Instagram and Facebook. I believe we're out. Ciao.